and publisher of Blank Slate Media, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our sit-down with State Senator Anna Kaplan, who is running for re-election on the Democratic and Working Family Party line in the 7th Senate District. She is opposed by former State Senator Jack Martins, who is running on the Republican and Conservative Party lines. Mr. Martins was invited to debate Ms. Kaplan or appear in a one-on-one, but did not accept. This is part of a series of interviews and debates with candidates running for office this November. I'd like to thank in advance the sponsor for this event and others, Northwell Health, and jump right in. So, good afternoon, Senator Kaplan, and let me start you off by, why are you running for re-election?
Well, I'm going to start by thanking you, Steve, for this opportunity, and I want to thank your sponsors for making this possible so that people resident in the 7th Senate District could actually get to know the candidates and get a feel for them so that they have a vested interest to go and vote for us. Now, with respect to your question, why I'm running for re-election, we all watched the horror on January 6th as the insurrectionists incited by Donald Trump attacking our democracy. All I could do that day was to think, how could this be happening here in America? As you know, I came to this country at age 13 when my parents had to make a very difficult decision to send me here for my safety. I saw firsthand what happened in my birth country, how the far-right extremists took over our communities, our country, and stole away the rights of women, minorities, Jews like me. And right now, we have the extremist groups are fighting like hell to try rob women of their rights, of rob us about our reproductive rights, overturn our sensible gun laws, and really dismantle the democracy of our country. But I refuse to let them. And as the New York State Senator in the last 4 years, I was one of the very big vocal advocates, making sure that we codify Roe in state law. I passed legislation, I wrote and passed the legislation that makes New York a safe haven, not only for New York women, but also for women from out of state, states that are not giving women their rights. And I wrote gun laws to take dangerous guns out of our community. And I'm fighting very hard against the rising tide of hate crimes, because we've seen them explode. When I came to this country, and often this is a question I get from a lot of people, weren't you scared? And my answer was, I was a lot more excited about coming here because I knew I could live my American dream. I could work hard and make my dreams come true. And as the first refugee elected to New York State Senate, as the only Democratic woman from Long Island elected to New York State Senate, I've seen firsthand how when we stand together, we can make progress. And there's nothing we can't do when we're united and together. And I really would like to ask every resident in District 7 for their support. I hope they can come out and support me on November 8th. And of course, early election. the 10 days of early election, because I want to make sure that the opportunities that were available to me to be available to the generations to come, and for them to live their American dream. Thank you.
What do you consider your top accomplishment since you were first elected in 2018?
I'm really proud of a lot of my accomplishments. Some of those accomplishments are.
You can give me multiple ones if you have them.
Great. Writing and passing the Holocaust bill, writing and passing ban of ghost guns, writing and passing of not having hate symbols in our public venues, whether it's a building, park, or vehicles, because we want to ensure that every residents feel comfortable in the public buildings and parks. I'm really proud to have worked with my partners, not just myself, but having the UBS Arena built, to have the first Long Island Railroad station built, one that hasn't been built for the last 50 years, to finishing and getting the third track through the finish line, to standing up for small businesses and bringing back grants for them, for making sure that I bring back record funding for our schools, record funding for our roads and highways, record funding for our villages and towns, codifying Roe into our state law, making sure that we fund centers of excellence and centers of technology so that we can come up with innovative ways and build green jobs, good paying middle class green jobs that are essential for us here in New York. Those have been some of the things that I worked really hard for. And I take this very personally. As a woman, I've always stood up for women's rights and will always stand up for women's rights.
So this is one of the issues, is abortion. Is how big a role do you see this playing in this election? You have pointed out differences in your opponent, who again, we offered to give him the opportunity to be here this afternoon. But tell us about your position on abortion and how it contrasts with your opponent.
So I remember 4 years ago, one of the reasons I was running for this, I came out of town council seat. And one of the reasons I ran for this seat was because I wanted to make sure we codify Roe into New York state law. And I remember I was being ridiculed by people telling me that this is a 50-year-old law. It's law of the land, Anna. It's never gonna change. 3.5 years later, we saw for ourselves how the extremist Supreme Court has overturned a 50-year-old law, a law that so many women fought for so that I could be beneficiary of. The rights that I have in this country to be upheld. And to see us right now, to have that 50-year-old law overturned is, in my opinion, a crisis for this entire country. And I hope everyone thinks of this as a huge, huge reason to go out and vote and make their voices heard. My opponent had plenty of opportunities to codify Roe into state law, but he never did. And his vote was a no. I don't need to say any more on that. His record is clear and my record is clear.
Well, let me ask you this, because he has said, he's been quoted saying that he supported it except, and I've heard other Republican legislators say this, they supported it except for how exceptions for a woman's health was treated. That there needed to be restrictions on the decision made regarding by the health of a woman.
It's easy to say that now. Steve, you, as well as everybody knows, he was in majority. He could have written a law that would have codified Roe and in a way that he thought was right. But the fact is that he had a chance to vote for the Reproductive Health Act and he voted no. I think there is a reason that we have records and we go back and look at people's records and what they stand for. Just recently, there was a town hall event when they were trying to remove some of these old laws from different towns. I was there and I spoke out, repeal of some of these old laws. There were many people out there speaking up. My opponent had a chance to be there and make his voice heard, but he wasn't. Actions speak much louder than words.
The other, or the issue, particularly that Republicans, your opponent, Republicans in this state, across the country are making, is the rise in crime in the state of New York, which the state of New York is no exception. Since 2020, there's been an uptick across the country in every state. But in this state, bail reform, cashless bail for misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies was approved in 2020, actually 2019, and the budget came effect in 2020, amended in the spring of 2020, and then again this past spring. Your opponent, and this is where a lot of the campaign is going, and we always want to sit down, and we've offered everybody opportunities to sit down and ask questions. Where I'm finding I get information is direct mail pieces, I guess targeted to voters. I don't know whether I'm considered a Republican, but I'm getting them from both sides, so maybe I'm independent. But we have one of these which came from the state committee, that you had a more crime agenda. You voted for cashless bail, freeing killers and thugs. You voted to hide criminals' rap sheets and voted for more prison releases. So why don't you talk about bail reform, your record, and what you think is the reason for the increase in crime?
So, as you mentioned yourself, crime is up throughout the country, in the red states, in the blue states. And I want you and your audience know their public safety is my priority, my top priority. I answer to the residents of District 7. I want to go further and to say that I support fully funding police. I work with law enforcement to make sure they have all the tools they need to keep our communities safe. I've built relationships with law enforcement in my district. I've brought back millions for our law enforcement. I also have a legislation that gives additional 500 million so that the law enforcement can have the tools and resources to do their job well. I also was a leading voice for making common sense fixes to the bail law to make sure we hold repeat offenders and violent criminals accountable, and to give discretion to the judges to keep our communities safe. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm proud to say I've been endorsed by New York State troopers, and I've been endorsed by New York City Union, Police Union, which is the largest union in the country. It's because of my work and advocacy and working with them. But I also have to say, a lot of this is not just cashless bail. We need to look at this and find solutions in multiple ways. It is not a one solution to this problem. We know mental health has a big part of this solution. We know guns are part of this solution. That's why it's important to work and make sure that we tackle this in a not just one way, but in multiple ways to get the results that we need.
So let me ask you this. All the emphasis, at least in the state, we've written about this, has been on cashless bail. What role do you think, and again, this was intended for misdemeanors, people who were not convicted of a crime, who would be in jail because they were charged, and could not afford bail. So that was the idea, is for people. So we had two systems of justice, one for the poor, and then one for others. What role in the legislation that was passed and laws that were passed, what role do you think that cashless bail played in the spike in crime that began in 2020?
Well, I think based on all the stats that I've seen and all the stats that I've read about, cashless bail is not really the reason for the rise. But my goal is to make sure my residents feel safe and do whatever I can to achieve the goal of public safety. We passed those laws to make sure that we hold everybody accountable, but not to have a system for the haves and not haves. I also think we've done a lot of work in terms of mental health and approaching this in a way we've seen also, since mental health was an issue, has always been an issue, but I think with COVID, it brought it up to surface, and we've seen how mental health is also impacting our public safety, and that we need to do a lot more. We've made some investments to make sure that we give those resources to people who need the help. And we have to do more in that field. But we also, at the same time, have to take dangerous guns out of our community. My ghost gun bill was a bill that was requested by a lot of law enforcement, because it was a bill to make sure we ban ghost guns, because That was something people could sit behind a computer, order it online, have it come to their home in a matter of 3 days. It could have been any individual without going through any background check and without having any serial ID number on it. And that 80% finished receiver could be put together in a matter of less than an hour. And you can have a fully automatic weapon in your hand. And we saw a lot of law enforcement recovering a lot of these ghost guns. We need to give them the tools to be able to trace. That's why it's so imperative to have a serial ID number on these guns. That's why it's imperative for people to go through a background check before they can purchase a gun.
Now, the Supreme Court in June, I believe, overturned a 100-year law in New York State, and it impacted some other states as well, on concealed carry.
Yes.
The legislature then approved some stringent things, checking people had to be trained, they had to be background checks, should include social media. Part of that has been held up by a judge in Syracuse, federal judge in Syracuse, and I think that's now is now before the courts to argue. So what is that? That seems to be, there's a question of where you could be. The Supreme Court said places like courthouses. Wonder why they said that you could have legislation there, but not Times Square. What's your feeling on New York's concealed carry law now in light of what the Supreme Court's decision?
So again, Steve, I hope your viewers, your audience, understand this is a lot bigger than me. I occupy this seat as their New York State Senator, and I want to be their voice. And I can't tell you how often I've heard from my residents telling me that they want sensible gun laws. And that to see this 100-year-old law to be overturned is going against everything they believe in and everything that they want in their communities. And my goal is to deliver for them and be their voice and their advocate. And I will work with my colleagues to make sure that we do everything in our power to keep New York State safe and we take these guns out of our communities. I am not in support of having our laws that have worked for us for the last 100 years overturned. I want to make sure we have communities that are safe, that residents feel comfortable going to their houses of worship, that children feel safe going to school or a movie theater or a mall. And those laws have worked for us. And to see them overturned is something that I will fight very hard against.
One final question on bail reform, because this has been so debated. There have been already, it's been amended twice. The only thing, and this was done with Governor Hochul supporting this, making the changes in the fall, but Eric Adams in New York City has said that there should be other changes, particularly allowing the standard of dangerousness to be considered by a judge to keep people. Do you agree? Have we gone, is the law now need any tweak, or do you think it's fine as it is?
I think anything that could impact our public safety demands a higher level of scrutiny right now. We want to make sure our communities feel safe, our people feel safe in their communities. And I'm happy to work with whoever I need to work and do whatever I need to do to keep our communities safe. I believe we made these changes, and I advocated very strongly for these common sense fixes. And we've given judges discretion. And we are taking repeated offenders and violent criminals off of the streets. I want to make sure that we do everything to give our law enforcement the tools they need to do their job well.
Okay. Let me ask you, there's been, you hear this on a regular basis that that the argument in favor of putting Republicans in the Senate, giving Republicans Senate control, is that the legislature is dominated by New York City Democrats, and that Long Island would be better served by having a Republican, Long Island dominated Senate. That would be a check on the legislature, and that would help Long Island. What's your response to that argument?
Well, my response is, first and foremost, the best person should be elected to the office. Whoever can actually deliver for the district. I'm happy to say that it was because of my win that we were able to codify Roe into state law. I'm happy to take my record and put it next to my opponent's record and look at what I've delivered in the last 4 years for the district and what he had delivered. I brought back record funding for our schools, record funding for our roads and highways, record funding for millions to give our water districts so that they can deal with the toxins that they're finding in our water. I fought for our clean air and clean water. I don't know what balance means. To me, balance is results. To be able to deliver for my constituents. And I hope everyone takes a look at my record and see all the things that I've accomplished and vote me in the office because of my legislative accomplishments and my, I guess, bringing back record funding for the district. I want to make sure first I take care of my district, but also our region. And it's not lost on me that what we do impacts the entire state. But I want to make sure that the voices from Long Island are being heard. And there is someone in the conference, my other colleagues, my city colleagues or upstate colleagues, also know that we need to be represented and we need to be also heard. And our opinion and our interests need to be also given priority.
One of the issues, one of the things that the governor tried was not successful. In fact, got tremendous blowback, was addressing affordable housing in the New York metropolitan area. And some people look at it, and part of it is that there's a shortage of housing units in the metropolitan area, which is helping drive rents up all over. New York City rents are astronomical. And it's too expensive. The children of people who live here, who grew up here, can't afford to move back. Seniors who want to downsize don't have a lot of alternatives. So the governor came up with a plan. Now, part of the issue is, and this has been addressed by California, is number one, in New York, the power is in the hands of local government. The fact that there's a shortage of housing is actually a good thing for them because it raises the values of their home. So there's not really a great incentive to say, okay, we're going to let local government take care of it. So how would you address, given that California has taken away some of the authority with legislation and said, we'll never get affordable housing if we leave it to the local jurisdiction. So do you think that's what New York needs to do? If not, then what should be done to deal with housing, the lack of housing?
So I wouldn't say that Governor Hochul did not succeed with affordable housing. Governor Hochul had ADUs that were
right,
basically talked about, and that was something that was not supported. Housing shortage is not just unique to Long Island. It's not unique to New York. We're seeing house shortage everywhere throughout the country. It's a problem, absolutely. And we need to come up with solutions to deal with it. I think it came after the 2007 crash. We stopped building. And I hear what you're saying about local government not wanting to have more development. I can tell you, I was a town councilwoman, and we did a lot of programs, and we did a lot of programs for seniors as well. And I would hear from the seniors that it's becoming prohibitive for me to stay in my community. And I really took that to heart. These were seniors that helped build the communities that I've been beneficiary of, that my children have been beneficiary of. And we need to do a lot more. We need to build affordable senior housing, affordable next generation housing. I worked very hard when I was a councilwoman. We actually passed 72 units of affordable senior housing in Manhasset. It didn't get built because of some problems with a lawsuit, but we actually passed it in the town because I worked for about 2 years with the community and got everybody on board. I think it is imperative for us to work with local government and bring them on the ride with us. We also can and are and need to do more in terms of bringing incentives to be able to build these. We need to bring incentives for our communities because I hear from some of the superintendents, our schools are at max capacity. We want to build more? Absolutely, but we need to also give them the tools to be able to build and absorb these children.
So why is nothing happening? I mean, it's still, again, they tried it, those assisted, giving people with single family homes the ability to have these auxiliary units in their home. That was a no-go. So what is there a solution there?
I think incentives will be a very big deal. We need to make sure that those incentives are available through New York State, and we need to really bring them to the villages and different municipalities and tell them we need to build our infrastructure so that we can absorb the building, whether it's with our sewer, with our water, with our schools. Those are important things that we need to do to alleviate some of the concern that the community has.
Now, one of the things for downtown, there's a small the chambers are having their breakfast tomorrow, so this is
Yes,
um,
I will be there.
a good time to discuss this. But the downtown business district, Mineola is doing which actually had transit-oriented housing that they built. They're now taking another look at rezoning, which is another thing that nobody wants to do in most of our area. But what is and Mineola said the world has changed. It's not going back. You're not getting the clothing stores. The places that Amazon has taken and that are ordering, it's going to be new things there. And part of the idea is we need to have housing over the shops so that you provide an audience. Is that the solution? Or what's your solution to downtown business districts that have been historically the heart of the community? Where it was a central meeting point. It was one of the things that people liked about these local communities, is they had a nice little downtown where you could do your shopping. What do you recommend be done? Now, I know that you work in your committee with small business. What are you doing to address that?
So many communities have found that to be a solution. Many communities in my district have done some of that. But again, it has to be something that the communities have to buy in and come and agree to have that dialogue and to see what works best for each community. Absolutely, that could be one of the solutions.
Who should lead that? When you say a buy-in, there's an exception. Mineola actually they have the town, they have the village government, and they're proposing this, and then they're working with groups. But the rest of the town of North Hempstead, you have multiple villages, and it's hard to do something if you don't get buy-in from all of them, and they're not necessarily that keen in giving up their independence.
So I think local officials and community leaders, chambers, I know, for example, that was a big thing in Great Neck, and they have started doing a lot of that. Again, it's local officials, and of course, it could work with the town officials and the state official. All of us have to work together to get this done. But it is also imperative that people are brought in, the community's input is taken into consideration, and that their concerns are being heard.
All right. One thing in terms of you mentioned school districts, and you brought in more funding. But if you look at school districts, one of the things touted about public schools is it evens the playing field so that children of affluent families and less affluent families, they get an equal education. But that's not the case on Long Island. You used to be in Great Neck. I think you're now in North Hills, but Great Neck is spending $38,000 per pupil this year. Sewantica, New Hyde Park, there's actually a school, New Hyde Park, Garden City Park Elementary School, which is about a mile away from a Great Neck Elementary School. They're paying about $26,000 a year for their property tax per pupil. Some places it's way less than that. If you go into some of the other schools that are just borderline providing an education, should there be that big a disparity between school districts for something that we call public education, and that's supposed to even the playing field, where the resources are entirely different from one neighboring community to the other?
So I am a product of public school myself. My children are product of a public school. I believe that's what we do great in this country. public school, like you said, it's leveling the playing field for every child. It's an equalizer to give every child the best foundation possible.
Are they really doing it when you spend $38,000 in Great Neck and Roslyn?
So
And
I hear you. I hear you.
I mean,
And I do see the discrepancy. And that has been actually another reason why I ran. In my district, Westbury School was one of the 5 most harmed schools in the state. And that's why I worked really hard to make sure that their voices were being heard, that I brought back funding for them to bring them up to par. Foundation 8, when it was established, was a way to make that equalizer. It is important that we treat every child in the state of New York as our child and make sure that we do the best that we can to give them the best education possible. I have fought for the last 4 years to make sure the voices of the schools that were not being heard and were neglected for decades to be heard. And right now, I know under my colleague, Senator Shelley Mayer, chairs K through 12 education. And I know they're taking a good look at the Foundation 8 formula and see how it's working and how it's not working. It is absolutely upon us to make sure that we give every school the tools and resources they need to give the best education to our children, not only for them to succeed, but for them to thrive. I fought hard before, and I will continue to fight hard for the schools that don't get enough support.
The 2% tax cap, which basically took away some of the decision-making from the public because apparently they can't be trusted to make the decisions themselves, set a level to do that. But when you have a 2% tax cap, where in order to exceed that 2%, you have to get 60% of the vote rather than 50% plus 1, that really makes it more difficult for a district that's spending less to catch up with the districts that are paying more. Kind of freezes everything. The 2% tax cap kind of froze everything in place for that disparity. So should there be exceptions to that cap in districts, let's say, spending less than $30,000 per pupil?
So we have to understand the reason for the 2% tax cap. The taxes were going up exponentially.
Voted on by the taxpayers.
But the taxpayers also coming to us elected and saying, this is unsustainable.
Stop me before I spend again.
And the fact is, we have to make everybody responsible for spending the taxpayer dollars. I believe in the 2% tax cap. That's why I fought hard to make sure we make it permanent when I was in the office my first year. And of course, everyone, they have a right to go ahead and pierce the tax cap if they choose to do so. But you also have to look at the community. If we keep raising these taxes, there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to be able to maintain and paying those taxes. It's going to drive more people out of our communities. A lot of seniors who are on a fixed income. It's going to make it so much harder for them. We need a balance, and I believe the 2% tax cap is a balance for our seniors, for people who have children, and for the people who are starting off.
Okay, I'll ask this question in 2 parts. One of the things, and I'm getting to congestion pricing, and I want to get your view on congestion pricing. which they want to basically in Manhattan, the downtown, they want to set up tolls and charge people coming in. Should the MTA and the money that they raise would go to mass transit. We are in an energy crisis. We do have Russia, Saudi Arabia trying to freeze out Europe and Ukraine and trying to divide NATO, and our prices at the gas pump are going up. Should the MTA be allowed, and New York City, to come up with pricing to charge people for coming into those areas that are congested?
So I have actually spoken at hearings that have to deal with congestion pricing. I've made my position very clear that I want to make sure Long Islanders get the benefit that they need and deserve. We need to make sure that Long Island riders get safe, clean, and on-time trains. I think it is vital for us to have our public transportation work for our residents. I will make it perfectly clear right here again. I've done it before. If a plan is to hurt Long Island and Long Islanders, I will be the first one who will speak in opposition of its implementation. But I also believe Long Islanders deserve safe, clean, and on-time trains. And I will make sure that we hold MTA accountable. I've done it before, and I will continue to do it. Just a couple of months ago, we were told that they are canceling express trains from North Shore of Long Island line. I was out there myself with Assemblywoman Gina Saletti, standing out at the train stations, asking everyone to help us participate, speak at the hearing. We made sure they had hearings so that MTA could hear from the residents. And we had more than several thousand participants who talked about how important those express trains were. And I'm happy to say that I worked very closely with MTA. They came back with additional train service, express trains, and I said, this is not good enough. Please go back to the working board and give us more. They went back and we reinstated those express trains in the morning and in the afternoon. I'm here to make sure that our residents have the best public transportation, one that they can count on, that they can rely on and take it regularly and get them out of their cars. And I'm here also to make sure that we hold MTA accountable to all of our residents.
Why not some of that money to do it to increase parking near the train stations? One of the things that there seems to be too little parking. Mineola, when they were building the third track, rather than opposing it, they negotiated with the governor and the MTA, and they got themselves a good-sized parking garage. And I know that trying to commute myself, as a commuter myself, the express train, definitely desirable. But if you don't live in Manhasset or Great Neck or Port, you're not getting an express train and there's no place to park to do that. Why not have more parking? Why not use that why not negotiate more parking, use some of the money for congestion pricing and get people so that more people can ride the train? If you made it easier to park, and inexpensive, you would have more people doing that.
I'm all for that. It's definitely something we can explore and look into and see what we can do. I remember, I myself and my children, we take train to New York City. I hate driving into traffic. It takes so much longer. Obviously, we want to make this as easy as possible, as reliable as possible. And that's something for sure that we should take a look and see and expand on the parking so that more people could have easier time parking and taking the train.
One of the things, here's my part B, and this may relate to congestion pricing being a benefit, which is the congestion in Long Island. If you drive, these days it seems worse because I think ridership is down on the trains and people taking cars. Driving into Manhattan seems to be, there's always traffic. And it's not just going into Manhattan. I think the traffic starts somewhere near the Suffolk border and goes right into the city if you're taking the Long Island Expressway. And you're also seeing now the side roads where there's congestion, Glen Cove Road, Lakeville Road, those type of places. Is there any attention being done to just the congestion of living on Long Island? So if I want to drive from here to Syosset, I'm invariably going to run into traffic. Is there anything that's being addressed to reduce that?
So you are absolutely right. It is a big congestion right here in our own communities. These are over 100-year-old communities. Often they're one lane. They weren't built with having a family having 4 cars as opposed to just one. That's why we do need to work on our infrastructure, on our roads. I don't have a solution for it, but that could be something, again, we could have different engineers look at it and come up with possibly different solutions for us. It is definitely congested. Congestion is a big issue in Long Island. I don't have simple answers for that because I don't think there are simple answers. But we can certainly take a look and come up with, maybe look at each road separately and come up with some ways to deal with that. That's something I think could be put in on a DOT study for them to do this work.
Okay. I appreciate taking your time. I have one final question, which is, why should voters going to the polls vote for you over your opponent?
I hope that the voters in this district, and believe me, I have 40% new district, so it has been a challenge. For the last 4 years, I've worked very much for the community to be their voice and their advocate in Albany. I stood up for our shared values, and I've continuously stood up for women's rights, will always do so. It's something that I believe in wholeheartedly. As a mother, I've always stood up for gun safety laws. I have a family right here also. I have my own children living here. And I want to do everything possible to make the lives of my residents slightly easier. In the last 4 years, we've worked with our residents, and irrespective of what the issue has been, whether it was unemployment insurance, whether getting a vaccine, whether getting tests, whether getting their power back, whether putting legislation to take dangerous guns out, or standing up for women's rights, or for getting money for our clean water or clean air. Those have been the issues I have fought for and will continue to fight for. The public Safety has always been my priority and will always remain my priority. I'm blessed to represent a very diverse district, and I've tried very hard to be a voice of everyone and have worked very much inclusivity with every community. I believe we are so much stronger together and united. I've been at rallies with people. I'm looking forward to making it my mission come next January pass the AAPI bill, which does basically the same thing as Holocaust bill does for the Asian American community, to talk about their contributions to this wonderful country. I consider myself a public servant and the voice for this district, and I've been honored to do this for the last 4 years. And I'm asking for the residents and their support to come out and vote for me so I could do it for another 2 years.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Anna Kaplan for participating in this discussion and sharing her views with us. I'd also like to thank Northwell once again for sponsoring the evening. For those unable to watch today live, a recording of our discussion will be able to be on our website, theisland360.com. You can look at Facebook and get to our YouTube page where this will be, and you can watch it at your convenience. And a story about this evening's event will appear in the 6 Blank Slate Media newspapers next week, right before the election, and on our website again, theisland360.com. And again, I want to thank State Senator Anna Kaplan for taking the time and